Hey, what's up everybody? This is Coach Matt Springer and I want to talk about how to do a GHD sit-up safely. And I'm going to give you guys tools to self-coach yourself when you're doing GHD sit-ups. If you film yourself, you'll be able to recognize this, and hopefully when you're doing it, you'll be able to recognize it too. But the GHD sit-ups could be on par with dangerous as, say, a rounded back deadlift or poorly recovering a clean or squat with a rounded back. It puts the same risk to the spine if you're not doing it very correct. So those are the things that I want to touch on today in particular. And you know, the biggest fault that I end up seeing out of people is what they're doing in terms of coming back up out of the bottom of a GHD sit-up. So in other words, you'll go back to the ground, your hands will touch, and now finishing the range of motion and getting back up to neutral is the global fault that I'm seeing a lot out of clients. So that's what we'll touch on. I'll demonstrate a couple good reps about what we want to see, and I'll demonstrate a couple bad reps about what we don't want to see. So for starters with the GHD, whenever you set it up, you always want your butt hanging off the pad. My feet are in, and when my feet are all the way in, my butt is nearly hanging all the way off the pad. Common error that you'll end up seeing is that people set their whole butt on top of the pad, which is an incorrect setup. In that case, you'd want to pull the feet of the GHD a little bit forward so that you can get all the way off. That's number one, most important. Number two is if you don't have the range of motion to go both arms back at the same time. Number one, I'd recommend getting the range of motion with maybe a couch stretch, but number two, if that's not permissible on the day, perhaps only do one hand at a time. So in other words, if range of motion is actually an issue, to make this movement safer, you would just go one hand touch at a time, as opposed to two-handed touch. Maybe you saw what I was about to show, but after you hit the ground is where the technique and the details come into play for the GHD sit-up. After your hand hits the ground, you're going to have bent knee, and the first thing that you want to immediately think about is locking and straightening out your knee. So in other words, what that looks like is hands touch, my knees are bent. The first thing I'm going to do is straighten my knees to come up in the rep. Again, my knees are bent. To start the rep, they lock, and I come up, lock. What is incorrect and what I'm seeing, and why, you know, what gave me inspiration to make this video, is folks aren't actually doing that locking phase. So in other words, watch my knee, watch how it stays bent. What I'm seeing is a lot of people relying solely on their psoas. So the big difference of actually locking the knee or not locking the knee is what muscles end up recruiting to get you over the top of the GHD sit-up. This is going to be a little bit of a geek speak, but when you don't lock your knee, in other words, it's bent and you're doing it incorrectly, you have a muscle that starts somewhere mid-femur and connects up to your lumbar. That's called your psoas. So what you got to recognize is every time you do a GHD sit-up with bent knee only, you're tugging on your lumbar spine, you're tugging your back out of place. That's where it becomes dangerous. When you're actually doing the GHD sit-up, initiating it with a locked knee, you're using your quad, which connects from your knee to your hip. So it's a much safer movement because it's not directly tugging on your spine. So you know folks, the rundown of it is your butt needs to be off the pad slightly, and if you don't have adequate range of motion, you can do it one hand at a time until you gain that range of motion. The area to focus on is going to be your psoas, like a couch stretch. Your quadricep, like a couch stretch, is going to help improve that. And then every time after you touch the ground, what you need to focus on is immediately locking the knee, and that's going to keep your back safe and is actually going to give you a lot more volume than if you do it the other way. So, hope that helps, and if you have questions, please leave them in the comments.